Okay.
Oh, Madison Taylor, here we go.
Wonderful. I will begin today, and then Maddie will go after me, and we'll take turns at the quarter hour like usual. So every 15. And Maddie and I are in a separate call so we can support each other in that other call too.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks for being here again.
Pleasure.
Okay, there's another Brock.
So Martin's just asking a question about how we will see people. I guess, yeah, we have the wall of Zoom squares here, so we can invite people to use the little yellow hand or the little hand raise feature or chat. And I guess I could open the chat on my laptop. But Anna, you're often...
I can also let you know if there's any chatter in the chat room.
That's great. That's great. Okay. I actually don't have it open on my computer yet. So.
Okay, everyone, I've opened the waiting room and I've started the live stream. Anna, are you okay to do an intro in a moment? Might be frozen.
Was that to me, Doug, or to?
That was to Anna, but she seems to maybe be frozen. A second. We'll give her a minute to unfreeze.
Of course, I didn't actually register for this meeting.
We've got
All right, I'm back. I'm back.
Welcome back.
Thanks. There's something about these conversations. This is not the first time I've been booted out of Zoom during these moments. I don't know, Mark Sussman. What do you think is happening?
It's not me.
Sorry, folks. Just a little Zoom humor. So great to see and hear so many and read the folks in the participation list, see some familiar faces. All right, Douglas, I'm ready to go. Thank you so much for spotlighting me. So, bonjour et bienvenue tout le monde. Welcome everybody on behalf of all of us behind the scenes here at Force Space. Welcome in everyone via Zoom or in person. We do have Mark Sussman and Martin French in person at Force Space, which is so great. Thank you so much for being there. So welcome to Biopolitics and Social Justice. This is the third in a series of conversations on community health. We are coming to you live from Concordia University's Force Space, which is located on unceded Indigenous lands in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. And as caretakers for the lands and waters we are meeting on, we are so grateful to the Kanien'kehá:ka Nation for their teachings about the earth and our relations. At Force Space, we work to connect people to the various initiatives, research projects, and dialogues that are happening across the university at any one time. And we do this via live events, such as this one. So to that end, it's really our pleasure to collaborate with the Center for Interdisciplinary Studies in Society and Culture to welcome all of you into our virtual and physical space for these conversations. So I will be passing it over to CISC Director Mark Sussman in just a sec. Before doing so, I'm just letting you know a couple things. We are streaming to YouTube, and I'll put that link in the chat. I just realized I should talk a little slower because we're also joined by two ASL interpreters, Jody, who's with us now. Hi, Jody. Thank you so much for being here. And Maddie, who will be tag teaming this conversation with Jody. Brock is in the background taking notes and mapping out your thoughts today. So if you're more of a person who likes to put ideas into the chat box rather than speaking, please go ahead. We are capturing all of those ideas for safekeeping. And this is a conversation. So we do appreciate if you would like to raise a virtual hand or signal to us somehow that you'd like to speak and jump in, and we'll go ahead and call on you, or Martin will as today's moderator. All right, folks, that's it for me. So over to you, Mark. Welcome.
Thank you, Anna. And as always, thank you, Anna and Doug and the team here at Fourth Space. It's such a pleasure to walk in here, and it really feels like a public forum always, which is a big gift to this university. I want to thank also for this series that we're running this winter, Conversations on Community Health. I want to thank the offices of the Provost and the VPRGS who have been supporting us. Brock, as Anna mentioned, who is supporting us with note-taking, analysis, and deep thinking on these topics. Jody and Maddie for interpreting for us today. And I'd also want to acknowledge the work of one of the Center for Interdisciplinary Studies working groups this term, or this year rather, on health, humanities, and the arts, being led by Ariella Friedman. And Ariella has been a great interlocutor throughout this process as well. As I think most of you probably are aware, but the School of Health is a new initiative at Concordia. It will have and does have three components, three hubs, one of which is still very much in formation, called Community Health. And these meetings, these discussions are meant to seek out research, projects, teaching, curricular initiatives that engage with community health, which is a field with a very, very broad spectrum, from the therapeutic end to the arts and humanities end, and of course those elements blend and overlap quite a bit. So we have had colleagues from applied human sciences, from English, from anthropology and sociology, from studio arts, from art history, really from across those three sectors, and colleagues from engineering and society and the business school as well. But the hub is really trying to be a space for both new and current initiatives to find a home at Concordia, and specifically an interdisciplinary home. I know that we'll be looking to launch some very concrete initiatives in the coming months to sort of allow the Community Health Hub to start to exist, to do projects. And we're in discussion with the Provost's office, with the Research and Grad Studies office, over what kinds of initiatives those might look like. So we want your suggestions and your needs and your concerns, if you have them as well. I'm very pleased that my colleague from sociology and anthropology, Martin French, is here today to moderate the discussion. And we both want to shout out to Rachel Berger, who was originally down to do it and was feeling a bit under the weather, as so many of us are or have been in recent weeks and months. And so we wish her speedy recovery. It's not COVID, so that's good. So I think I will begin by, last thing to say is that there will be a search for a scientific director of the Community Health Hub in the coming months. I don't have an exact timeline of that, but that's just something to be aware of, that each of the three hubs will have a director. Two of them have been identified, and community health is still coming into focus. So that's another thing to keep on your radar. And a search for the dean of the School of Health is underway, as I understand. So we want to really hear from you and those of you who are here to speak. We ask that We ask that you simply introduce yourself, as Martin will introduce certain questions and topics as the afternoon goes on. We want to hear what you work on, what department and field you come from, and what you're looking for under the broad umbrella of community health. So I will turn it over to Martin, who's very kindly jumped in today.
Well, thank you so
Sure.
much, Mark. I just want to begin by really thanking Mark and CISC for motivating this super important series of conversations at this, really formative moment for the School of Health at Concordia University. And, I think it's vital that we're gathering to discuss what community health is and might be, and what the community health hub might be as well. So, as Mark mentioned, I'm going to moderate this discussion today, co-moderate with Mark, and we're really excited to hear what those of you who are joining us today have to say about the theme today, which is touching on community health, biopolitics, and social justice. Mark mentioned that I'm stepping in for Rachel, Dr. Rachel Berger, and I just want to use this opportunity to point you to Dr. Berger's work. Dr. Berger is an associate professor with the Department of History here at Concordia, a fellow with the Simone de Beauvoir Institute, director of the Indy grad program, and Dr. Berger's work shines a spotlight on colonial biopolitics, and would have been, I think, a great foundation for today's discussion. I'll introduce myself. So, as I mentioned, my name is Martin. I use he, him pronouns. You're welcome to disclose your pronouns should you care to. I'm an associate professor with the Department of Sociology and Anthropology here at Concordia University. And this year, I'm also the interim director of the Technoculture, Art, and Games Research Center, TAG. And my work, in a nutshell, touches on risk, surveillance, and social justice. And I often think a lot about health under the rubric of those three keywords. I have spent a lot of time thinking about health surveillance as a mode of risk management, the biopolitics of health surveillance, and who is advantaged and particularly disadvantaged by those politics, let's say. So I wanted to, I think, just spend a moment, maybe just advancing a couple of concepts before opening up to the discussion. So, defining our key terms a little bit, putting some definitions on the table for us to discuss, break down, deconstruct, and we can use these concepts and the questions, a number of questions that I have for the audience today to motivate our discussion. So what is biopolitics, or what does the term biopolitics signify? I think if we look at the genealogy written by Roberto Esposito, we can trace a number of points of origin underneath this concept. Esposito shows us that it sort of, starts to come into prominence in the early 20th century. But for me, and I think many critical social scientists and humanities scholars, I really have Michel Foucault's concept of biopolitics in mind when I use the term, and particularly the way that Foucault sort of occupied that term and that term and overturned it to mean something quite different from the way it was being used in the early 20th century. For Foucault, the concept of biopolitics was used to illustrate a profound set of transformations at the heart of sovereign power. And these transformations ostensibly gave rise to a new form of politics, a biopolitics of collective human vitality, morbidity, and mortality. The politics of life itself. As the concept has been debated and discussed by humanities and social science scholars, there have been challenges, for example, by Achille Mbembe to get us think not just about the politics of life, but also about the politics of death. And Mbembe's concept of necropolitics helps us to think about that and center that. And certainly I think during the COVID-19 pandemic, we may need to think about the necropolitics of long-term care, for example. Well, what happens when we connect these concerns with the conditions of life, biopolitics, the conditions of death, necropolitics, to social justice? I think that for me, social justice describes a practice or praxis which aims at developing an equitable or more equitable distribution of justice in our societies, our communities. And in the context of today's discussion, perhaps we can talk about how a community health hub or humanities and social science researchers might articulate community health initiatives that would foster more equitable and just distributions of positive health outcomes. As Mark mentioned, we're really interested to hear from folks about what you think the Community Health Hub should do. What do you expect the Community Health Hub to do? Can we articulate your research concerns through these prisms of biopolitics and social justice? So I think that's all I wanted to say by way of opening. And maybe I can jump to the first question.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
So one of the motivating questions that we have for you today is, how does your work, how does your research or creative work engage with community health? How might it be helped by connection with other researchers? Is the idea of a cross-disciplinary research cluster useful to your work? And this is really posed within that broader framing question of how might we consider the study of biopolitics and the practice of social justice as critical and key elements of community health. And I don't know if folks want to weigh in, they can raise their digital hands, for example.
And maybe I'll just add, again, I'll just remind you, what we'd love is just if you just briefly introduce yourself so that as we go, we get a sense of who's here and what your work is about, or what your thoughts and aspirations are for this initiative.
So over to you, audience members.
So I know there's a lot of folks here who are already very engaged. Heather, are you opening your camera to speak to us?
Yes, first camera and then microphone. Yeah, so I can jump in.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Your volume is a little low in the room. I don't know if we can raise the Zoom audio.
Okay, so I don't know if I can do that on my end. I have a.
That's great, Heather. You sound great.
It sounds fine. Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
Okay, great. So I'm Heather McLaughlin. I'm from the Department of Creative Arts Therapies, and thank you for welcoming us to this conversation. I'm really delighted to be part of interdisciplinary conversations. And so I'm an art therapist, psychotherapist, couple and family therapist, full-time faculty, currently directing the art therapy program. And coming today, it's also another hat within our program that I'm wearing as our new Concordia Arts and Health Center. I'm directing that, and that's a new initiative that our department has launched. It's a long time dream that we've been working towards that is finally coming to life, and it is a service providing center that eventually will also have research connected to it in different ways. That's something that we're looking at, but we're starting really from the service end. It's an extension of our pre-existing practicum within our art, drama, music, and play therapy programs. We already have practicum at well over 100 sites in the city, and what inspired this initiative was really some of the areas in the community that might benefit and need and want creative arts therapies the most, and other types of health services were often the ones that were the most challenging to be able to bring these services to, because there ended up being different obstacles, different bridges not there, often some gap in resource. And so we wanted to come up with a model of how to be able to figure out what the obstacles might be, or breaks in the bridge, and how could we find innovative ways to bring resources in to be able to support this, so that we could expand who and how we're providing services, and really ensuring that when it is going into the community in different ways, that we are getting to learn from the communities and working from the ground up with them, rather than sort of coming in from above. And so we've just started launching some different pilot projects with different partners where our students are providing service. And so I guess from that background coming in, we're starting from a place that this is applied learning that provides a service, and that providing the service is central. And that was the real wish of wanting to ensure first that we are providing service as much as we can, and in very thoughtful and social justice informed ways on many planes, really considered systemically. And then, of course, it's important that our work is research informed, and also it's going to create all kinds of interesting opportunities to create research. And so I'm just sort of wondering how this might be able to fit into this conversation, and to potential collaborations and opportunities. And also, just because we are sort of starting from that service place, how that might also fit within this broader initiative, as well as the research that sort of service first position. And the name of that, so it's the Concordia Arts and Health Center.
Concordia Arts and Health Center. And I'll just jump in. Thank you, Heather. There are a number of, I think a couple of other colleagues from your department from Creative Arts Therapies are with us today, which is great. We
Yes.
had Janice and others participate in previous conversations. So, it's great, always great to hear about the very embedded community-based work that you guys are doing. And I would love to ask, as we go, not necessarily right now, but I'd love to see if you guys could help us think about ways to either collaborate with or include other disciplinary work in the work you're doing, because it seems you guys have figured out something very essential about, as you say, not working from the top down in communities, but working with and providing services that are needed and are felt to be needed by the communities themselves. And it feels like that's got to be essential for whatever a community health hub is going to do. But
yeah, thanks, Mark. And I also just want to echo Mark. Heather, thank you so much for that. I would, another concept that we can talk about today absolutely is what does community look like? How do we enact community? And as Mark emphasized your point to thinking about designing services from the ground up seems like such a vital intervention in the way that our contemporary systems of care are organized and managed, I think. So I don't know if you have further thoughts on that as well. I would love to hear about that. Do we have a speakers list though also starting, or?
I haven't.
Okay. So Heather, if you want to respond to any of those points, that would be awesome. And then I think we've got Lisa next. Sorry.
And Cynthia.
Okay, thank you. So Heather, and then we'll go to Lisa and Cynthia.
So and I was listening to you, and then I quickly lost the points that you wanted me to speak to. So forgive me.
So one was just if you could tell us a little bit more about the great work that the discussions that you've had internally about how to connect, I think, to community, how to think about bringing different disciplines together in ways that meet community needs, and then related to that, ways that you are thinking about or actively connecting with community organizations, community members, to define community and to understand what their desires or needs are with respect to the services that the center might provide.
Okay, so I'll speak to it briefly. Of course, I mean, these are really, really broad and big questions that I can't do justice to, and what makes it necessarily complex is that it's case by case, a lot of this, and so these are community relationships that, including with my colleagues here who are joining me, that we've fostered over decades, and so there's already long-standing relationships that are in place, and so building those relationships and finding out where's the needs and the interests has been something that has been a massive project of many people over decades, and so much of this does require us to all be actively engaged and aware of what's happening in arts and health and the greater health community in the places, certainly in Greater Montreal, and then wherever our students might also be located if they're doing internships in other places. So that also comes in. And outside of that, sort of, at least for this center, we use a systemic meta model, and so that's a whole big conversation that would take too long for this, but that is an evolving work in process of just how do we consider the ways of creating systemic connections and fostering the health of those, and meeting them and respecting their own dynamics and needs. That's an evolving process, and something that would be, something we'd be excited to research as well. And then to come to your interdisciplinary piece, we are hybrids. We are all in hybrid fields. The creative arts therapies of bringing together elements of therapy, our different arts disciplines, and then elements of education as well. So in their nature, our professions overlap. We connect and work and collaborate with people in different realms of those. So within the arts and health realms and education realms, so there's already a lot of interdisciplinary collaboration that is just the nature of our fields, and has always been a part of the work that we do. And I think where we're sort of expanding, thinking about this is just, with this different opportunity, and really trying to think about, like, what are the resources, what helps this to be sustainable, how do we conceptualize social justice, and always the conceptualization within a greater sort of climate justice, earth justice as well. Like, how do we sort of expand what our understanding of health is, and creativity, and care, and how beyond, sort of how within what we can provide, but also how beyond what we provide can we sort of really, really tend to these areas.
That's great. Thank you so much, Heather. That's fantastic. You've given us a lot to hook into, and probably we'll circle back to some of this, I think, in the discussion today. But I'd like to go next. Thank you, Lisa, for waiting very patiently. Can we hear from you next, please?
Sure. So my name is Lisa Ndejrou. Um, I'm at the moment I'm a postdoc at the University of Toronto. I'm a psychotherapist. I'm a theater person, I suppose. I've worked interdisciplinarily with oral history, with the arts, with memory, with uh, all kinds of ways to work to support um, healing in my community. I come from the London community, and more broadly, in the Black communities in Montreal. We were just told that our project, community-centered knowledges of fostering Black wellness in Montreal, was approved for an RGDI SHIRP grant for the next 3 years.
Oh,
And
amazing.
so that,
Congratulations.
thank you. So that brought together 4 community organizations, um, uh, MJ Rwigema in Applied Human Sciences, Bonnie Harnden in Creative Arts Therapies, Patty Ranahan in Applied Human Sciences as well. I am sort of in the middle of community and university. And yeah, so we're going to get ready to look at the community knowledges and um, we're working with mental health, Black mental health in the communities, and the ways in which the our communities have been experiencing anti-Black racism in the healthcare and in the healthcare system, and specifically around mental health. How organizations have been responding to the needs in the communities, and also seeing how to support that. The sort of the community came together around a need of a community organization to train psychosocial or community care workers or community care practitioners at the community level. So the mental health, how can I say that? The mental health sort of services are very, they're all the professional layers: psychiatrists, psychologists, psychotherapists, uh, uh, the family and marriage counselors. So there are professional how can I say that, realms, and then there are other forms of support in the community that need to be strengthened. And what do they need? How do we do it? And so all of these things are going to be part of and that have been going on. Like we submitted the grant in November, and since then we've been running community care circles. We've been running there are existing ways inside of the community. Can we document? Can we value them? Can we develop? Can we, etc., etc. Voila.
That's amazing. Thank you for that. And just picking up on a couple of things that you mentioned. I mean, first of all, contesting anti-Black racism in our healthcare systems, I think, is a huge, huge issue. There's so much work to be done. One of the things that I'm wondering, as we're visioning and envisioning what a community health hub at a university like Concordia might look like, one of the things I'm wondering is, how to support that work. How could we envision articulating a community health hub that would uplift and really support that vital work that you're doing. I don't know if you have thoughts on that. Obviously, getting funding, I think, is one part of it, but are there other things that the School of Health and the Community Health Hub should be thinking about to support this type of important work?
Yeah, I think so. I think there are something, I mean, I don't want to, like, I want to be able to sit down with, we got the news like yesterday, so it's very fresh. Not everybody knows yet. And I think that what I would like to do is to sit down. Now that we do have this possibility, I would like to sit down, but I would love to have a relationship, because some of the things that we have found already in the past, so since November, and a little bit before that, because we started before that to get, so in the last year, let's say, what we have found is that as community organizations, we're not, how can I say, there are things that we can do in terms of support. And then there are things that very quickly will fall outside of what we have the capacity to do, right? Like, because the community organizations are not well funded, right? Like, for example, one of the things that was amazing in this situation was that Concordia allowed most of the funds to go to the community organizations and put in funds to support students, which is very rare, right? That was true. It's tremendous. And so there are things that are already happening that I'm so, I could just kiss people like that. It's there's a moment right now that is so wonderful, and that I want to be able to continue. There is a collaboration, there is a collaborative piece to it as well. The Office of Community Engagement, for example, with Andrea Clark has been involved. The Office of Research has been like, they have accompanied this. And so that is very, very good. I'm thinking as soon as we started talking about this, we were working with 4 organizations in the English sector. As soon as we started talking about this, there are people in the French speaking community that have started talking. There immediately other things start coming in. Like, for example, one of our, and I don't know if that, I don't know to what extent we can talk about it, but because I think this is streamed, so I just thought about, like, are we so? But I was thinking about, for example, mental health in prisons, for example, right? As soon as we have mental health in prisons, like, mental health immediately comes and touches on, there's on the one hand the mental health piece, like the sort of, I want to, like, I need to feel better, but there's also the sort of evaluation piece that becomes immediately has consequences immediately beyond so there are all these ethical and that need really careful thinking through and support and advocacy. And there are a lot of things that I was thinking, for example, there are things that go beyond mental health, like when situations are not, it's not about mental health, it's about lack of resources, right? Like, for example, if I am a single mother in a situation where I'm struggling, I have lack of access to, how do I make sure that that I take care of my child or my children, and if I'm struggling, that social services don't immediately sort of So, and how do we even start addressing that? And it takes one person, one case like this to completely when you're not very resourced, you have two possibilities. You can either say to the person, well, this is beyond what I can, or you overextend and then you burn out, or there are these, how do we think about making more with less, or smarter, or there are things to think through. And I don't think that I think that this is something that we can all contribute to. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's off the top of my head.
well, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. I mean, one of the things you're foregrounding for us is, many things you're foregrounding for us, but one of them is to have us think about how racial justice and economic justice intersect, maybe under the rubric of our social justice concerns. The problem of flowing money to community-based organizations. Yeah, I think that these are really important considerations that you've put on the table for us. So thank you so much for that. And I think, as with the points that Heather made, we can also circle back and develop these points more in today's discussion.
Say one thing? Sorry,
Yeah.
may I just say one thing? Sometimes it's not so much about money. Like sometimes it's issues that don't have so much to do with money. Sometimes, well, I mean, in the sense that sometimes it's about presence. It's about trust. It's about relationships. Like if, let's say, so-and-so needs 2 days or 3 days to take care of, I don't know, something, that time, if somebody can take care of the child for that time, right, then
Yes.
there is no problem, right? So it's not a question so much about money. It's a question of connections and ties that when we talk about community, c'est un peu ça. Huh? It's so, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, merci pour ça. I mean, like, this also connects us back to what Heather was saying about, decades spent relationship building as really being foundational here. So thank you so much, Lisa, for all of these amazing points. I'd like to go next to Cynthia, who has been waiting on the list. And do we have others on the list as well?
Not yet, but
okay.
There will be others.
I would like to encourage others who have joined us today to put up your electronic hand to get on the speakers list and help us, build on these amazing points that our first two speakers have given us to think with. So Cynthia, thanks for patiently waiting, and over to you, please.
Oh, my pleasure. It's great to hear about all the great work that's going on. I certainly get to witness the work Heather is doing on a daily basis, which is a privilege. So I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Creative Arts Therapies, music therapy, but I'm a disability studies scholar, critical disability studies scholar, and I bring that work to the education and health realms. So my work focuses largely on mobilizing lived and scholarly disability knowledge in post-secondary settings. And I kind of have two strands to my work, I guess I would say. One is focusing directly on accessibility in and of higher education, and with a particular focus in lots of ways on how it is that we ensure our professional programs are accessible to disabled students so that our health professions grow in representation of disabled students. So often disability are the folks that we help, but not the helpers. So that's kind of one strand. And I think that the other strand is really about mobilizing that knowledge in ways that let us imagine, more equitable, more just understandings of what it means to live a good disabled life. I think that's a really urgent conversation we're seeing just in the news today. About a woman who didn't have good support to live a good life, and so had felt she had no other alternative than to choose a medically assisted death. And this has been the call of many disabled Canadians politically, and there's been lots of protesting and lots of presentations to Senate about their fears that the medically assisted death legislation and its expansion is, putting more focus on the right to die than the right to live. And I know it's a hot button topic in a really tension-filled debate, but the reality for so many people is that they should never ever have to choose death because they can't choose life. So I'm really looking at how it is that we bring disabled voices to the center of our education curricula to ensure that they're well represented when we're teaching therapists to work with disabled people, because so often the default is the discourse of deficit, the discourse of a disabled life not being one that anybody would choose or want to live. And that living a good life means overcoming disability to the best of your ability and sort of normalizing and leaving as much of disability behind as you possibly can. So I'm really, in lots of ways, my work is really interdisciplinary, and it's fantastic to have spaces that value that kind of work and that make a place for scholars to collaborate and come together and reach across disciplines in order to think these sort of complicated questions through. So that's kind of where I sit right now, and then the focus of my work at the moment.
That's excellent. Thank you so much, Cynthia, for bringing another, I think, really vital concept to the table here when we think about what community health is and might be. You're centering lived experiences for us. Lived, as one of my collaborators says in a SSHRC-funded project that we have on HIV surveillance, it's important, it's necessary, fundamental to center lived and living experiences so that we can think about what is necessary from a policy perspective or a knowledge perspective, an education perspective. And I'm just wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit more about how that looks from your perspective, bringing people into the discussion, the logistics around that, any challenges you face around that, or any of those kinds of things. Basically the same thing that I asked to Lisa, how a community health hub could support this really important work.
I think one of the major ways, or one of the big challenges is, particularly when it comes to disability, is the almost immovable dominance, I would say, of medical knowledge when it comes to talking about what disability is and what it can or should be. And so I think that the possibility of making space for this kind of knowledge, and I talk about lived disability knowledge, but also scholarly disability knowledge, which comes from disabled scholars who have both deep lived experience and deep theoretical analyses and deep experience in doing this work, and to have spaces where that can actually be valued more than nominally. I would say it's certainly been my experience over many years of doing this work and of doing activism that there's always a nod to the importance of centering lived experience, but it's generally forgotten as soon as we walk out of the room. So I think that it's really important. When I work with students, it's really fascinating to see all of the ways that they've never thought when they walk into classrooms to work with students who have identified disabilities, and they're given a list of things that their teachers want them to work on. They've never thought that there's any other way to go about this, and that maybe that list of musts from their classroom teachers that talks about them needing to sit still and pay attention more isn't actually what's going to, working on those in music therapy isn't actually what's going to help them thrive in the classroom. Maybe they need a space to be who they are and actually explore who they are and try and connect with a disability identity that's positive rather than always negative and always deficit oriented and always shame laden. So, we have to be able to bring this to the center of research spaces. It needs to not be on the periphery in the ways that it generally has been, particularly in health disciplines, I would say, because we rely so dominantly on the knowledge that's generated by disciplines, psychology, and it's not that that's not valuable, but it dominates to the extent that the notion of disability identity is just often erased, and it's not something that we would want to help people connect with. So I think to make space for that kind of work to flourish is really, really important.
Yeah, thank you. That's absolutely important to underscore, and thank you so much for that. And I was thinking also that I should cite, if I'm thinking about justice, I want to practice citational justice. So I also want to cite the person that I quoted earlier, Valerie Nicholson. That's who intervened in my project to help me think about our project. She intervened in our project to help me think about lived and living experiences and different ways that we need to center them in our considerations of HIV surveillance. Are there other folks who want to weigh in on this first question, or should we jump to the next question? Okay, so the next question for discussion, and I think we've touched on some of this already, but if folks have further thoughts on this, is how might collaboration with others under the umbrella of a community health hub contribute towards a broader agenda promoting social justice? So here, I guess we're wanting to think about how the community health hub, can foster this type of cross-disciplinary, interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary collaboration, but also with a specific view to realizing social justice aims. I don't know if folks have thoughts on any of these points.
See, Lisa has a finger.
Thanks, Lisa.
Sorry. I've been, and there again, I'm here alone where I'm usually with a group, and so I speak for myself at the moment. I think a lot about because we are, in our case, for example, we're going to be centering the community organizations. I think there's often help that is useful in terms of translating from lived experience to what is important in the academic or in the policy or in these different realms of different languages. And it's sorry, Brock, I raised just my own finger. What was I going to say? I was going to say that there are realms that need specific language. There are translations that need to be done. There is documentation that is useful. There is strategic thinking that is important in order to get from point A to point B. Oftentimes I'm thinking about, like, I've been doing art for social change, these ideas of community arts, these ideas of change, for example, and effectiveness of change. And when do we get from what we do to the actual sort of policy change, right? Like, I remember once we had a conversation in applied human sciences. I think it was a brown bag, and people who were like scholars that were nearing retirement were speaking to younger scholars coming in and talking about the ways in which often it's about you about opportunity hitting readiness, right? Like it's not because you are working on something that the political arm of this, or the political people or répondant is ready for it. But sometimes there's a political readiness that is going to encounter your research, and then all of a sudden it becomes relevant. So how do we make sure that we understand the language that needs to be spoken, right? In order to, I feel as though I'm going around in circles again. I'm going to stop.
No, this is so good, Lisa. Thank you. I think that one of the things that I want to ask you, which sort of bridges this point, and I think what one of the points you were making earlier as well is with respect to language justice. I mean, you talked about how you're working with a number of community groups in English, but also some of this work sparked some conversation en français, and an orientation, I think you were saying an orientation, a future orientation to kind of like think about how to connect with groups that are, primarily living and working in French. Do you have thoughts about like the logistics of that, or how that's going to be accomplished in your project? Or maybe more broadly, how, we as a university again could support that type of work across different linguistic communities, just as an example.
I would have to sit with it more specifically for you to because I feel as though there are specific things that you're thinking about. I know that in the work that we've been thinking about now, the moment that has been happening after in the Black Lives Matter, in this sort of coming together of communities right now, that has been really interesting, has been that this consciousness of a blackness that goes beyond. So the people are gathering around the racial piece more than fractured around language right now, which is tremendous because it means that English, let's say African community, English speaking African communities, French speaking African communities, Caribbean English, so those sort of colonial language lines don't fracture people that way. But then there's also the lived experience and the actual language needs. That is also something that is very important. And so I think it would have to, I'm always thinking about the needs of the users, right? Because they are the ones that, like, I'm thinking in terms of services. If I need to express myself in this language, that is the language that I, as a user, as someone who needs the service, that is the thing that I would focus on. But yeah, that's not a very straightforward answer, I think, to what you were asking.
Well, no, I think it's great though, because you've moved us to a sort of kind of, I think, a higher level of consideration there. I mean, there's the sort of pragmatic service delivery kind of set of questions, but now you're also asking us to think maybe across, maybe intersectionally, like about the broader conditions of social solidarity, which, I think, that's one of the things I'm hearing in what you're saying is we can't just think about, how to have translation for different communities accessing different services, but the broader, I guess, social justice, racial justice context, in which we're trying to think about things like those pragmatic questions.
And can I add? I appreciate, Lisa, also that you mentioned policy, and which is another kind of translation. I mean, there's linguistic sort of language to language translation, spoken language, but then there's the kind of language of bureaucracies and the language of funding organizations. And I feel like that's where the weight of a university can be helpful, or maybe can be useful in a community setting, which is to help with translation of, embedded or community-based or on the ground, very practical needs, like you were saying, childcare adjacent to healthcare providing services, for example, or English to French or vice versa, or any of the other many languages spoken in Montreal. But then translating those needs to the realm of policy in such a way that it makes the needs make sense and are identifiable and clear, to funding organizations or to government or whatever large entity needs to understand it. I feel like that's something where, cross-sector work can be useful, maybe. So, and we've actually, in previous meetings, we've had colleagues from the Department of Translation Studies, which is interesting too. Like they're getting interested in what community health might be. Debbie Folleron, I think, has joined us.
That's great. Thanks, Mark and Lisa, for that. Fantastic. I think maybe can we go to Heather next?
Oh, that hand down. Okay. So just, yeah, so many ideas that Lisa's brought up, and also thinking back to some of what Cynthia brought into, just really, really inspiring. So thank you for that. It's nice to have one's mind lit up in these ways at this time of the day, of the week. So I guess I was really thinking about this idea of what comes and what can benefit from interdisciplinary work, and it brought me in a couple of directions. One was it made me think in my hat as a couple and family therapist that it's a field that's deeply influenced by systems theory, and there's this very interesting time in the history of the development of systems theory that was a great time of interdisciplinary collaboration. There was a lot of excitement about this approach, and it was a model that was applied in many seemingly different disciplines. It was in engineering and mathematics and biology, and eventually in couple and family therapy, brought into couple and family therapy via an anthropologist, Gregory Bates, and influenced by an early biologist in the 1920s, and later on by a mathematician. And so just thinking about these times in history when there was something, whatever it was, like a trend or funding or whatever, that brought together these types of conversations on something that was united, but also could be looked at from different perspectives, just how interesting that is, and how wonderful it would be to be able to sort of find ways to invite that. And what came from this was just really interesting paradigm shifts and evolving paradigm shifts, and the paradigm shift of like maybe working and expanding a model, but also the paradigm shift of learning what other people are learning in their other disciplines. That, we talk so much about the different knowledge silos, and there's even as a psychotherapist, couple and family therapist, art therapist, these are also, there's things overlapping, but in their silos are reinventing the wheel and coming up with the same thing that somebody came up with, that there often isn't, for all sorts of logistic, but also the embedded power structures and whatever else informs that there isn't the connecting, collaborating kind of conversations that could really be benefiting all of them. So just really wanting to highlight sort of how to make room for conversations that can bring some paradigm shifts, really thinking about the way that the power plays into all of that. And it also, I was hearing when Lisa brought in the word change, and change is something I think a lot about. Just, the different types of change and how we conceptualize change, what contributes to that. And there's sort of the change that surprises us by perpetuating the problems, and then the changes that can actually be meaningful, and even meaningful changes do not always stay sustainable. So then what also helps them be sustainable, and I really think that does need to be a cross-disciplinary conversation for all sorts of reasons.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Heather. I mean, you sort of like ended on the point that I was going to also ask for more information about. So I don't know if you have more information about this, but like, thank you for foregrounding for us the importance of making space for these conversations that can shift paradigms. And I think that we're having, this is maybe a good example of those types of conversations, so the CISC has, organized these conversations. How do we sustain that? What is a good, I don't know if you have thoughts on how once the community health hub is in place, how it can kind of sustain these really important conversations that take us back to like the fundamental concepts that we work through and with, and then how to think in ways, how to imagine ways to shift beyond those, or past any blockages that those sedimented forms of thinking that we've established might create. Another big question for you.
Yeah, and a good one, because it's like, first off, to have broad conversations, how do you get broad groups of people to come together? Like, I'm not going to have the answer to your questions. I'm going to have more questions, but like, what is the motivation that's going to help people to come together? And there's so many variables that come into that. Like, how is it an accessible way that people can come together? And what do we think about that? What are the different elements that do make it so that as many different people as possible can come, and after the can, then the why do they want to, how to compel them to want to, and then from there goes into like the structure and all those sorts of things to facilitate it, so that it does feel like it's giving and generating in a way that compels people to stay a part of it. And so I don't have a grand answer, but what I sort of was thinking about a little bit, going back to, I can't remember the word you used biopolitics, and then you flipped it and used the way of considering it as far as death and dying as well. And one thing I was thinking about, as far as a way that community comes together that is sort of a different and interesting phenomena that does seem to generate a lot of interest, is desk cafes. So these cafes that sort of in the spirit of a salon, people coming together in a facilitated way to discuss mortality and dying. I'd done a group project with my students at one point in group and family art therapy, where I just sent them to find a group, any group happening in the community in any way, to just come and be a part of, as somebody like the experience of showing up new and something that fit with their interest. And a number of them chose to go to desk cafes, and all of them were just jam-packed. I was shocked. I was surprised first by how many students chose to go to that, and then I was surprised by the fact that they said like they were at capacity. And so just really, really curious, like what is it? I mean, what is it about this topic that so many people avoid and deny, and yet you create this certain setting in this way that compels people to go? I'd wanted to go, and then COVID shut down the happening of people coming together in groups. And if I get any great answers when I do go to one, I'll report back.
That's great. I really appreciate all the thinking and sharing of the work that that you're all doing, especially Heather and Cynthia and Lisa. Something you just said, Heather, about paradigm shifts and the history of paradigm shifts in across these various disciplines made me think of what Cynthia was describing earlier about the work of making the professional programs, the professional art therapy programs, more accessible as a step towards making the professions themselves more accessible. To me, that sort of made me stop in my tracks for a minute and just think about the timeline of that and the breadth and the long-term commitment of that, which is amazing. And again, that's something that hopefully, again, when I say a university, I mean we have the smaller time windows of research grants, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years for the larger ones, let's say, renewable in some cases. But a university can establish something that lasts longer and that has a bigger horizon or a longer timeline. And I think that's again, maybe this enterprise of a school of health can help establish initiatives that will last long enough to really take root in communities or professions or communities of professions, for example. Oh yeah, Lisa, sorry. You're still muted, Lisa. I think you're still muted.
Am I still muted?
Or no, we don't hear you.
Oh, interesting. You can't hear me?
No, sorry, Lisa, we don't hear you, I'm afraid. I don't know if that's at our end.
No, it's hard to hear here too.
Oh, that's better.
Can you hear me now? Yeah, okay. So I was thinking about the different models or ways that have already happened. Like I'm thinking about, for example, I come out of the Center for Oral History and Digital Storytelling, where in its heyday, it was 18 community organizations, 40 researchers. It was like 400 people at any given time. So during the first 7 years, I would say it was like 400 people at any given time, right? Students, faculty, artists, community organizations, like many people had access to the community, access to were involved in the so I'm thinking that we have, this is just one project, but we have precedents in the university of people of collaborations with the, I mean, where a lot of different people of a lot of buy-in, of a lot of sort of enthusiasm, and there are things that we've already done that have been really interesting. And so I think there's something to be, I was going to say mind, but it sounds extractive. So the idea is to say, we should go back and see what do we have already that, yeah.
Thanks, Lisa. I think your microphone maybe just cut a little bit at the end, but I think you were just sort of pointing to like this, energy and critical mass organized around the Center for Oral History and Digital Storytelling, and kind of like how to catalyze and keep that going.
Yeah, and also that codes, and I would also say the Center for the Arts and Human Development, these are existing models that have been working very well for a long time.
Right.
I totally take that point, for sure.
I'm thinking about things that I think about Erin Manning's Sense Lab, for example, where there were all kinds of people, like it was people who were coming together and thinking together, and they like, I don't know if Sense Lab is still, I haven't been in the university in a bit, but people coming together and really engaging in the work at all kinds of levels.
Yeah, thank you for those great examples. I mean, because you're showing us that we've done it before, we can do it again. I think. Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
Kate has a hand.
Oh, yes. Yes, over to you, Kate, please.
Hi, sorry, I had to come in late to the conversation, but I was at the first of these, and I have a longstanding interest in the community health. I taught narrative medicine to medical students, and I teach in the creative writing program. My interest in this tends to be practical. So there were a couple of things that have been raised. Lisa, you mentioned readiness versus meeting research. And the other is space, which is also something that came up, that kind of the physical space in which conversations can actually happen. And this came up in the first of these roundtables as well. And I feel very strongly that a space, however minimal, is an important aspect of this, should be an important aspect of this, because I do feel that the siloing effect of Concordia, theoretically, we all want to be interdisciplinary, but the fact is most of us don't know what the other people are doing. So I'm wondering if, again, that with a sense of practicality, that space to me is important, but I'm also wondering if having a sense of, well, what elements of policy, government policy that we're interested in are most prominent, and to have a kind of Rolodex, as it were, of relevant researchers, people who are interested in working in various, so that the community, the health community or the health institute can work as a kind of matchmaking element, because the great examples you were just giving about the Center for Oral History and various others, what they have in common is a kind of central purpose, right? Which the Institute of Health, the community health, I don't even know what we're calling it now, but might not have. I mean, its mandate would inevitably be broader. It would touch on various things like disability, working with communities who are, historically disadvantaged, particularly in the medical community in terms of medical care. So there's a vast range of issues that I would see as being central to any kind of community health. So having a sort of really a kind of bank, as it were, knowing what policies were coming up the pipeline that were interesting, matching them with researchers, and then facilitating conversations in an actual space on those subjects, seemed to me at least one approach, again, very pragmatic, that could be taken. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate, for that. Such a great point to have us think about, fostering relationships, not just across disciplines, but across organizations, and as Mark said, across sectors. I mean, I think that the School of Health has technology development and innovation aspirations, but is entering that domain in a field that's already very, very competitive, dominated by entrepreneurial hospitals that do biomedical innovation, that have already patient populations, and so on. So I think that those kinds of aspirations, the School of Health may be challenged in some ways to realize, but maybe this is an occasion for talking about, building on extant strengths that we have at Concordia University to think about how to, really foster something different from that, institutionalized model of biomedical innovation and technology development. I guess obviously, still participating in that conversation, of course, but that is doing something really different as well in terms of, yeah, to use your word, Kate, matchmaking. I like that. Do others want to jump in? Should we move to the next question?
Yeah, I think we should. I'll just throw out though, part of, again, to use one of Kate's words, one of the pragmatic goals of this series is to try to turn the abstraction of the School of Health website, which basically says this thing is coming, this thing is being created at the university, to turn that into practical, concrete, either initiatives, programs, things that we say we want that to mean, or to, and so, we're here as scribes. If you have thoughts about either, small funding initiatives that could launch projects, curricular initiatives, special courses that we might propose get offered next year even, or next summer in intensive formats, or initiatives around physical space. I put in the chat in response to Kate that we're certainly gonna reporting back that that's been a consistent call, that I quite agree that a space like Codes, or a community like Codes, gets built around having a physical space where people can go and bump into folks from other disciplines, and work together. So I think that is critical. But the more kind of concrete proposals or suggestions that you can throw out, we're really eager to come up with a nice big long list. And I'll just, since I'm calling for your suggestions, we're also in the report that we'll do in May, at the end of this sequence, we're going to put together a bibliography, a list of web resources, a list of other programs at other institutions, other initiatives, whether they're in academia or not, just, again, to flesh out where we're going to situate ourselves with respect to the outside world. So, the more you can send in to us, to me and Brock, the better, and we'll jam that into our appendix in this report. So, thanks. That's a little advertisement.
No, that is fantastic, Mark. Thank you so much, and it bridges wonderfully into the next question, which is, the Community Health Hub is planned to house curricular initiatives, an interdisciplinary PhD program, and other micro certificate programs have been suggested. What other research programs can we envision here? And I want to just use the stage for a minute to talk about a course, or I'm envisioning it. We're envisioning it as a course that one of my collaborations is developing. It's on HIV surveillance and the ways that concepts that epidemiologists, public health professionals, and other medical professionals use, the way that we can make those concepts available, sensible to, open for discussion and debate amongst community activists. For example, I'm collaborating with a number of community groups that are participating in a movement, the global movement, really to end HIV criminalization, stigma, and discrimination. It's a non-credit course, and I don't know exactly what its place is going to be in relation to the university, but maybe this type of initiative, the Community Health Hub could support. I don't know if others have ideas like this. Over to you, audience. if anyone has any thoughts on curricular initiatives that the Community Health Hub could support.
I don't know what.
Maybe I guess people see in the chat, but maybe I'll just read something Cynthia offered. Cynthia writes, I teach a course called Disability, Equity, and the Therapy Dilemma that brings critical disability studies and disability justice to the center of thinking about how to support a diversity of disabled people to live good lives on their own terms. So that's one great example. You know, I've been thinking a lot about the possibility of synchronous teaching or co-teaching, particularly in the format of a summer intensive course, where two classes from two departments, you know, are scheduled synchronously so that they can meet together. They don't maybe they don't have to always meet together, but they can either work in parallel and then work together. Just as one model that I would pitch. We've had some initiatives in the past that have come out of the Office of the Provost, the Vice Provost Teaching and Learning Office, and I feel like we could build on what's been learned from some of those and maybe augment in terms of resources, in terms of credits. You know, I'm just imagining what we might ask for at higher levels. But I see both Lisa and Heather with hands raised, so you guys, you know more.
Yeah, do you hear me?
Very
Can
faintly.
you hear me?
Very faintly.
How
Better
come?
now.
Better now? Okay, so one of the things that I was wondering, what does it mean when you say support? Like what does support mean in terms of what does curricular support mean?
I guess one thing it can mean on a very practical level is the offering of additional teaching credits to a department to try something that they don't normally try, or to, at the level of the faculty, to try something interdisciplinary that may not even be grounded in a specific department. Or, you know, again, the School of Health is still coming into existence, but presumably the School of Health itself, as a school, will be able to put on courses. In the background of this is always a question of money and funding. So I guess when I say support, what I mean is funding and giving the opportunity for faculty from different departments to pitch something and say, oh, for example, the HIV anti-stigmatization and harm reduction initiative, which is currently, that Martin's talking about, which is currently non-credited. What would that look like if it were a 3-credit course? Would it be an intensive? Would it be at the graduate level, undergrad? Would it mix students from multiple departments? Those kinds of questions. So where do we get support for the freedom to dream about, unusual and interdisciplinary curricular experiments, I guess.
If I may just build on that point too, Mark, in response to your question, Lisa, it's a great one. I mean, one of the things that this course that we're developing is doing is we got funding from SHRC for a series of outreach activities under the Connections program. And so the course/reading group is part of this. And we're using the SHRC funding to give stipends to community members who may be unwaged. Ultimately, that's what we're going to use a lot of the funding for, to support people, to be able to take the time to take the class. So yeah, that is maybe also a concrete example of what support might mean. I don't know how the School of Health might fund that sort of thing. Yeah, I mean, it's such a great question. What do we mean when we say support? What might that look like? And I'm thinking also of what you were saying earlier about broadening our horizons so that we're not just focused on cash flows, but so that we are also thinking about other forms of material support, like yeah, maybe childcare and these types of things.
And I know
I want to,
Heather, oh, sorry, Heather has a hand up. Maybe can I throw in one other, or Lisa, you go ahead. I just have one other, a different scenario to throw out as well in answer to your question.
I was thinking about like the possibility of creating, and there are two things. Like the community care practitioners type of training, and maybe have that in the located somewhere, because we're in the middle of university and community. It would be nice to have to be housed somewhere. So we are, I guess MJ is the faculty. I have an affiliate status, so I'm kind of so I guess, yeah. So I think that there are some things that I would need to understand more clearly. There are some things that I would love to do in terms of and maybe I would have to speak to Heather around the arts and health. I'm connected to the arts and health hub with Nisha Sachnani in with the World Health Organization and all of that, through Rwanda, through the University for Global Health Equity in Rwanda. And so I was thinking about, is it possible to think about what cultural elements might do in terms of health or healing. So I'm working with pre-colonial stories, for example. It's not art as art discipline, but there's something that is, it does something. And so how to think en tout cas. Blah, blah. And then, so that is one thing. And then another thing is, I would love to be able, and this is something I've tried for years now, to take students, to bring students to Africa. I would like to do that. I don't know if that has anything to do with anything, but well.
Yeah, well, it's such a great question about how we think about, going beyond the university, right? Whether it's bringing students to field sites in Africa or field sites in Montreal. I think, the fourth space has this sort of like mandate of trying to get beyond the walls of the university. But I think that this is something that we can absolutely foreground in the imagining and visioning of the community health hub. So another set of great points. Thank you so much, Lisa. Now, Mark, you had something you were going to say, I think, and then should we go to Heather?
Heather, why don't you go ahead? You've been waiting a long time. I'm talking too much.
I've been talking a lot too, so it's all right. And Lisa, we'll need to talk. I think there's lots of interesting potential there, and great to hear you've been collaborating with Nisha. So I have a lot of ideas about what you're talking about, and would love to talk about it more in more depth. I think I could say generally, I think creative arts therapies, we have lots of ideas of how, especially like we are always coming up with wonderful electives we'd like to develop, and especially our programs are so core programs for developing the professionals in our field, but we would love to be able to broaden and look at other ways we could be teaching on arts and health, and we're just limited by how many electives we can offer. And so just having that potential to expand that would be incredible. And so that's one realm we'd be super excited about. There's the other, to sort of tilt it another way, with the Arts and Health Center. It's an internship site, and I would be very happy to host students. Once it gets going a little bit more, we probably need a year or so to really get it rolling with our own students. But I would really like to find ways to bring in interns from other disciplines, and not just interns that would be certainly interns that could be providing arts and health services to the community, but also maybe people from other disciplines that might want to come in and work on this from their expertise. We've already been collaborating with the JMSB, for example, and I'm sure that there would be other from other faculties. It could be really neat to find ways to bring people in. We've also been already taking an intern from another university, and I'd be really curious about inter-university collaborations. So there's a lot of potential for that. And then to sort of spin off a bit of something that Lisa was saying, as far as students going and working on location in different places, one of the things we're piloting, which I'd be really curious to see how this goes. We're having our first student who's going to be working in James Bay as an internship, linked to the center, and the student doing this is requiring us to adapt the way that she'll be joining classes and interacting with classes, because she does need to go up on site once a month for a week for the next year, and normally you can't attend classes remotely. And so we've decided to sort of test out this paradigm shift to see how that can be, of prioritizing the students being able to practice in certain locations rather than prioritizing the need for them to always be present in class. So as I say, it's something we're trying out. We'll see how it goes, but I think the need is so great. I think that there could be a lot of interesting potential for further projects in Indigenous communities throughout Canada, of course, and we've really been working on building relationships with the Cree Health Board and James Bay Social Services. And then if I sort of just pivot a little more close to home with something that's already been established over a few years through, I think it's the Office of Community Engagement that started this, is the relationship Concordia has with Bâtiment 7 in Point St. Charles, which is sort of this social innovation center. I don't know how they refer to their model, but this amazing building and collection of initiatives that come together to provide different services to the community. The one that we're connected to is the Point Charles Art School, that is directed by an art therapist. And there's a new, I don't know if it's a new general mental health clinic or if it's focused on mental health specifically, but there's lots of things happening there. And Concordia already has an office based in that building and has been trying to find ways to connect in. And I think either connecting with that already pre-existing initiative or considering the model of that and how that might be able to come in could be something to look at.
That's great. Yeah, thanks, Heather. I'm a big fan of Bâtiment 7. And it's great to know about the internship site, the center as a developing internship site as well. I was just earlier going to throw out, in addition to a kind of the idea of curricular support, also, of course, just small grant support within community health. That, again, these don't exist yet, but we could ask or we could propose. If we had a way to outline what kind of seed grants might look like in the field. Could one imagine, for example, an existing project receiving support to, add an additional member from a different discipline, to add an external member who is not employed by university, as as a consultant, as a translator, as a, someone with community expertise. So what kinds of sort of paradigms for, small internal grants could we say to the research side of the university, hey, if you opened up a few of these, this is what we might do. I think there would be receptivity to that.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And I just wanted to say also that this is a really people are putting really great models on the table. I know, and I want to add one more, which is the Simone de Beauvoir Institute has this historically run the HIV/AIDS class, which has an amazing internship. I think Dr. Karen Herland is teaching it this year. Brilliant. I noticed people have put a few things in the chat, and I just want to make a bit of space in case you want to speak about them. Kate, I saw you put something in the chat. Brock, I think you put something in the chat. I know you're busy doing other things, but for the meeting, which is this amazing note board that you're taking and keeping for us. But Kate or Brock, do you want to say anything about what you had put in the chat, or if others put anything in the chat? If you want to say anything about them, I don't have a laptop in front of me, so I'm seeing like a little chat pop up with like half a point, and then it's like ... But if anyone, I'll just hold some space for you in case you want to hop in and elaborate on what you put in the chat.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit about Engage. So I am an RA at Engage, and I think it's a really great space that we have that really connects with the community, and that comes from creative arts therapy. We work with mainly seniors, but it's an intergenerational space to basically just like do art and talk. And I think that that's also something else that could benefit from this project as well, because there is a need, especially for like working with, so it's a space that's in a mall, and one of the challenges that we have is kind of like persuading the owners of malls to want to work with us to have more space to do more events, because what they kind of see is like a loss of income. So it would be interesting to see ways in which the new School of Health could maybe help expand that and maybe help support us in being able to use community space more. That's all for me.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brock, for that. I mean, just really underscoring for us the importance of being out in the community. We had that discussion of space earlier at the university, but space in the community is also vital. So thank you for that great point, Brock. Kate, I don't know if you wanted to weigh in. I know we've got Lisa also on the speakers list.
Lisa, why don't you go ahead?
Unfortunately.
Oh, we lost Kate.
Kate had to head out, but Lisa, go ahead.
I wanted to know if it was possible to continue this conversation. Like, for example, when you said what would be some interesting seed grant possibilities, to me, I was thinking I would love to sit down with the group and put that on the table and think together what would be something that people would feel be useful in a sort of short to medium term. Is that possible? And would we be talking with you if we did that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I'm eager to know about are concrete examples that we could turn into kind of, how can I say, outlines for the type of grant program we could say, to the senior administration, listen, this is a way to advance a community health hub. If you open a set of grants that look like this, there are projects that are standing up on their feet. Some are just getting going. Some have been going a long time. But they would benefit in these particular ways, like either providing funds to rent a community space or whatever. That's just one of a million possibilities. But yeah, I would say if your research group, now that you're launched with this, I didn't hear exactly where this first grant has come from, what the source was, but wherever it's coming from, like now this is launching something, and it would be great to communicate upwards to the research arm of the university. This is what would really help us now at the stage we're at. That would be great. Yeah. And again, because I know not everyone has been in the earlier meetings, maybe I'll just take a minute now to say we have one more of these kind of consultation conversations remaining in two weeks from today, same time, Thursday at 2 p.m. on the 28th of April. And then in May, we may do a kind of final wrap-up meeting, and then we're going to deliver a report on all the different suggestions and all the different initiatives we've been hearing about by the end of May to the folks who are planning the School of Health, and it'll be one of the first things that lands on the desk of the new dean as they come in, which I'm assuming will be over the summer. So.
Thanks for that, Mark, and again, great question, Lisa, for getting us down to like pragmatics here. Do you think it's should we move to the last kind of question? Okay, so this is just, I guess, a summative question, getting us to think about, and maybe encapsulate a lot of the things that we've been talking about today. How can we envision a school and a research hub that makes meaningful, long-term, and ethical connections with communities? How might the hub serve as a center for community-embedded events and education? So I know we've touched on a number of these things already, but this question is, I think, having us underscore, that long-term work of community building and the ethics, like centering for us the ethical considerations of working with communities in such an initiative. Ending with big questions. Heather?
So I'll take an attempt to speak to it just to get it rolling, but because I think I often go so much back to process, and so I sort of think about, like, before thinking about the outcome, what is the process to even come up with this sort of answer? Because I think that there really needs to be work of, like, what are the values uniting, what is the purpose, all these sort of business plan type categories that are important to clarify, and the process of clarifying them also involves, like, deciding who is in these conversations, and how are those conversations facilitated, and how are decisions made. And so I think and forgive me, because this is my first one I'm coming to, and I know there's a tremendous amount of work, and I don't know what's already happened. So I'm just sort of saying this as a general statement without knowing what's already been done. But I just would be curious about, how it could be to develop an innovative and really thoughtful process in itself to start to speak to that question.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Thank you, Heather, to get us to kick us off, really thinking about the process. I mean, the process of community formation, and these fundamental, maybe existential questions of how we define and think about community. and I like how you encapsulated it for us in a really succinct way. Who is in the conversation? And I think that that's so important. Maybe
And I'd be happy to help with that too. If that is something like just talking about the process and sort of thinking about what you might need to think about it and those sorts of questions, I'd be happy to help in the ways that I can from my backgrounds.
That would be great. We have a sort of a fifth meeting that's going to be smaller, and for folks who've attended one or several in some cases of these meetings through the winter term, just to kind of reflect back. That's on May 19th. If I know not everyone's around third week of May. Some people are involved with research and maybe aren't coming to the university, but that's a day when we'll want to bring people who feel like they have more to say, or who want to like maybe even review a draft of the report and give us critique and feedback and tell us what we left out. So that meeting is planned for the 19th of May. So we have some time, but if you're interested, or Heather or Lisa, if you have stuff you'd like to offer, that would be so great if you join us then. And it may have a slightly different format than this. It may be more of us sitting around a table, together, in less of a public way.
That'd be great.
I think just building on what Mark was saying and the exchange that you, Heather, and Mark have just had, in a way, I guess these conversations have to be also ongoing, right? So kudos first of all to SISC for motivating these conversations and holding these conversations. I suppose at a certain point, the institutional weight of the School of Health also should be put behind like supporting this this type of initiative in terms of like incorporating diversity of perspectives with respect to what what the community building, relationship building process should look like, and who is involved. I feel like it has to be an iterative conversation, an open-ended conversation, and yeah, super important that SISC has started it before the School of Health gets going.
And actually, if I could, I'll just say, our sort of mandate or our thought was we were going to spend the winter term on these conversations, and it's becoming very clear this will be ongoing well into next year. And we've sponsored a few events that are sort of ancillary to these conversations, speakers. Ariella has held a few events here at Fourth Space. Martha Langford in art history, historian of Canadian photography, held some really great events last week on photography and therapy with a doctor from the MUHC, from the ICU, who works with photography and therapy. We've had a number of different arts and health related events, and it's clear we're gonna be looking to do more throughout next year. So it's
Thanks.
just getting started.
Yeah. So I mean, and everybody has done such a great job in today's discussion, I think, of surfacing and centering for us great points to work on and to build on the momentum that that's really, I think, coming out of these discussions. So thank you so much for everybody. To everyone, thank you so much for coming to this today. I'm not necessarily wrapping up. I'm just putting a thank you on the table. First of all, I don't know if other folks have any points, last points that they want to make on this big question before we close down. Okay, well, I will continue with my thank yous then. Thank you everybody so much for taking the time to participate in these discussions today, for really generously sharing your thoughts and ideas and the so many amazing. I took pages and pages of notes on the amazing
Yeah,
initiatives.
same here.
That you have going on.
Yeah.
Bravo! And it's just super exciting. This has really been an exciting discussion for me to participate in. So thank you so much. Thank you, Mark, for organizing this, everybody on your team, Sisk, who has been motivating the discussion. Thank you so much. I don't know if you have also
Well,
words that
Maddie
you
and
want to.
Jody, once again, for joining us as interpreters, Brock for visual note-taking, and I'll throw it back to Anna.
Yeah, thanks, Anna.
Thanks. Thank you both. And thanks again for coming into Fourth Space and jumping in as moderator last minute, Martin. That's great. I mean, as expected, there was so much interest in today's conversation, and it is, of course, the Thursday before a long weekend. So again, as expected, a lot of people trailed off, but thankfully we have the record of it. So thanks, Brock, again, for taking those notes. And of course, we have the live stream and the recording. So we invite you back. April 28th, I believe, Mark, is the fourth one. And then May 19th, as you already said, is the wrap up. So Lisa, Heather, Kate, I mean, those of you who are really involved today, we invite you back for the next conversation on April 28th, and then the wrap up potentially. We're going to close up the Zoom. Madison, have a great afternoon. And everybody else as well.
Big
See
thanks to
you.
Martin.
See you next time.
Take care. Bye.
Bye, everybody.